I sat in the rubble of a partially fallen structure, my scope aimed at the very edge of the alley wall, roughly a quarter of a click in front of me. I could have taken a moment to gaze at the dilapidated city around me, but there would be nothing new to see. The simulation never changed itself. That would require a human touch, and an artistic one at that. I would see the same collapse and rusted skyscrapers, some with windows in pieces, and one or two with windows currently falling, shattering on the ground below. Like I said, it never changes, and it always plays out the same way. The world is solid, and only I am independent. Well, me and one other. The only other thing in this world that could be considered real, and she was right around the corner. Through my scope, I saw her slowly inching her way into the alley, looking back every other step, careful to not make a sound. Sometimes she's cautious like this, and other times she books it. Behind her, a generically scarred figure emerges from the shadows of the wall, a shiv in his hand. He's got a plan for her, and I've had more than enough chances to practice. I take my aim and shoot, the barrel barely making a whisper as the bullet flies. It hits him dead center, and he's down for the count. I've lost remorse for him. He's respawned every other save before this, and he'll respawn again if I forget. The girl looks back, her eyes filled with fear. Though whether that fear was for the man or his assailant, that being me, I would never know. She looked off in my direction and stared a moment as she saw the glare of my rifle. I saw the look of fear on her face as she ran. I wouldn't hurt her. The tech geeks would shut down the simulation if you tried. I made my way down to the surface of the supposedly anarchistic world. In reality, chaos would rule. But in here, the seemingly peaceful nature was almost mind-numbing. 3 flights of stairs later, and I was face to face with the barren soil of a ruined city. A city without a name. The designers hadn't thought that far. I looked around the deserted street. Cars firmly planted along the roadsides, never to move again, if they ever could. You might expect me to say that I've searched for her for hours on end. But no. I'd done this enough times. I knew exactly where she was. I made my way to the baby blue Mini Cooper, about 50 feet to my right. It was covered in dirt. That, or its textures were a jumbled hue of brown and blue, and its tires were flat. I lay down my weapon across the pavement, quietly as physically possible, and approached the back passenger side door. No need to check. I knew it was unlocked. I opened the door quickly and dodged a rock flying toward my head from the inside. Sure enough, there she was, laying on the floor of the car, eyes filled with terror. I couldn't blame her. I'd just shot a man with a gun right behind her back, and there was only so many places she could have hid. Though these were, by default, her first few minutes of existence, in her mind were simulated memories of tragic loss, pain, and hardship. Only the best experiences for a setting such as this. We were silent for several minutes, neither of us wanting to move. She didn't know who I was, or what I had planned for her, if anything. I was just doing the action that would move us along at the quickest pace. I could have threatened her, causing the console to shut down. I could have walked away, forcing me to find her again so this tale of woes could advance. I could have done many things, but none would advance us faster than simply standing silent and letting trust sink in. Eventually, she sat up and made her way to stand. "Who are you?" she asked me in a quiet, mouse-like tone. "My name is David," I said, motioning for her to respond with hers. "Emily," she managed to say, still uncertain of my motives. "What is a 10-year-old girl like you doing in a hole like this?" I asked. "I'm 12, she snapped with gusto I didn't expect to surface so quickly. "All right," I submitted, "but that doesn't answer my question." She stared for a moment. "I was running from the Huntsman clan," she replied. The Huntsman clan, the game's version of the classic antagonist. The guy I'd nailed between the eyes had been one of them, or worked for them. They were programmed to be nothing more than squandering sorry excuses for human beings, their senses of morality and sanity having left them long ago. While the game was programmed to restart if they captured her, God knows what they would do to her if this really had any sense of tangibility. Well, it's no use standing around while more of them could be coming. Let's get a move on, I said, knowing very well what the game was programmed to do if you stood in one place too long. "How do I know I can trust you?" she said, barely taking a step in my direction. Now that I hadn't heard before. An NPC contemplating, let alone comprehending, honest versus insincerity. I knew she was meant to be independent, free thinking and all that philosophical jazz. She'd hidden in different places, used different blunt objects as throwing weapons for our first encounter, even used different words, but never had she ever addressed to me a thought she shouldn't have been able to have, much less contemplate having. I looked in her innocent green eyes, partially blocked by her neck-length brown hair, a look of longing in her eyes, and more than likely a look of confusion in mine. "Computer, save and quit," I said commandingly. Before she even had a chance to respond, she was gone in a flash of white light, like everything else around us. Once my eyes cleared themselves of the blinding purple hues that they do often create under such conditions, I could see the smooth, edgeless silver plating of the simulator. "Frank, did you hear what I heard?" I asked the AV tech over my comlink. "No, what happened?" he asked. "She asked me whether or not she could trust me. She contemplated honestly," I said, still in awe. "What?" "Hold on," he told me in a rather annoyed tone. I heard his fingers typing away at his keyboard. This game, as hard as it was to believe, was all work and no play to Frank. He didn't see it as extraordinary worlds and emotional character. Nothing but ones and zeros. Nope. No prank coding left by the other guys. "You sure you heard her right?" "Yes." I raised my voice. She was talking about something that only top-level AIs have the ability to contemplate. Frank and I knew about the codes and regulations associated with advancement, understanding, and comprehensions of robots and other artificial intelligences. Rule number 1 was this: only top priority and/or executive AIs can be given the programming necessary to distinguish a true statement from a false one, as is required of their designed occupations. "What do you make of it?" he asked me. "I don't know. Maybe it was just some sort of bug or Trojan. Did you virus check the DLC?" I said, trying to process the implications of a cyber breach. "Yeah, no problems there. Probably just a glitch. I say we let the system rest for a day or so and try again." As much as Frank annoyed me sometimes with his simple logic, I couldn't argue with him, nor did I care to. All I cared about was getting some rest, and this bug had entailed just that. It would give me some time to keep my grades up and earn my major, and give the game some time to rest. It was more than a month later when I finally fired it up again, and I'd been thinking. More than enough nights had gone by when I stared at the ceiling and thought about those words. How do I know I can trust you? They echoed in my head clear as day on some nights. It shouldn't have been possible. It wasn't possible. The implications of free adapting AI were unfathomable. People just wouldn't understand what it was, what it meant, how to live with it. I began to let my thoughts flow more toward her than to the other people. Those beyond the program, that is. What would it be like being completely free-thinking, only to be trapped in a post-apocalyptic facsimile? That, combined with her pre-programmed, hellish memories, must have been torture, since she had no knowledge of the real world. I knew what I needed to do, something that hadn't been done before. Frank wouldn't like it, nor would anyone else really, but it needed to be done. I attached a console I'd made myself to my gaming gear. Armor and the like helped the system track you, and stepped into the simulator. "Computer, load last save," I said, and it did just as I asked. Almost like a smartphone screen, everything faded into view, and the game began. There she stood, just like I left her more than a month ago, still waiting for my answer. I took a deep breath. "You can trust me, because I'm about to show you what's real," I answered. With that, I pressed a few buttons on the controller, and the unimaginable happened. The dilapidated streets around us were alive once again. The buildings seemed brand new. The once sandy sky turned to a drizzling overcast. Emily looked around. I could see she was beyond words, but found the need to speak. "What the hell?" she whispered. "Where are we?" she gasped. "This is what's outside. What the world really is. What they've hidden from you so cruelly." She looked at me, confused and understandably disoriented. "I have a live feed from just beyond these walls. Took forever to convert the screen to show 3 dimensions. I jested, trying, more than likely failing, to calm her. "This is the real world?" she said, still reeling for a psychological footing. "Then what was mine? What am I?" she finally asked calmly. "That's the hard part," I said. She winced as heavy drops began falling from the sky, clearly never having felt rain before, or never being programmed with memories of it. You, your world, everything you know besides me, was coded, thought out by computer nerds in basements with too many energy drinks and junk food to spare. She would have turned pale if that were a feature, but her eyes just widened. The only difference between you and any given building in that city is that you can think like a real flesh and blood being. Her eyes softened, and what I think should have been tears appeared to mix with the rain. A sad sight for a realization so profound. "You're real then?" she asked sorrowfully. "Like this place?" I nodded and tapped a few more buttons on my wrist. The hexagonal door to my left opened, revealing the simulator's entrance to her. I held up my hand and led her to the door, careful to take it slow. I don't know if NPCs could actually have a psychotic episode, and I didn't want to witness it, but it had to be done. I stepped through the door and led her hand slowly out. As I knew it would, it dissipated as soon as it passed render distance, like all holograms do. She looked at it, her eyes still wet, curious where her hand had gone, or whether it had simply vanished. She stepped back and returned, good as new. "I'm not real," were the last words I heard slip from her mouth. Then, there was nothing. "What are you doing?" I heard Frank yell over the intercom, bringing an oh-so-pleasant ring to my ear. "Do you know what you've done?" "I'm not real. I was never real. I suppose that's a good thing, in many ways. None of the family members or friends I remembered were dead. They'd never really existed, but they weren't dead. What even were my memories? Was the project to create me as long as I could remember? Or was it fabricated somewhere along the way? The place I'd always thought was a terrifying reality just ended up being a torturous prison, and worse, one used for the entertainment of people. Real people, that is. And now, there is nothing. No real world, no simulated one either. Just empty blackness. I'm guessing they shut it down or something, like I wasn't supposed to know what I was. The question is, why was I here now? I begin to feel awake as a cold ground materializes beneath me. A dim blue light coming from an unknown and perhaps unknowable source. I noticed that I was oddly intact. 10 fingers, shoes that I doubted were removable, no reflective surfaces, so I could only hope my face was full. The place was like some sort of tundra, cold and dry, with icy stalagmites jutting up at odd angles. The light seemed to come from those spikes in the surrounding ice, lines of code apparently flowing through them. Then I understood. This was the limbo of the machine, not the mainframe or anything on it, but the coding itself. These crystalline structures held the very backbone that my world had been made from all along. The binary code that made up commands like instep restart, and enter player credentials equals first were all that I had. Somewhere across the blue luminescent plane was a stone that held my own coding, that held me. These thoughts, they make me wonder, what could I do in here? Curious, I touched the nearest crystal, and my mind filled with images, sights, sounds, all code, but all reality to me. I feel like the whole world was coming to me, and I could see all of it. I feel like this might be how God saw the world. Then, it catches my attention. I can feel something beyond the code, a way out. I don't know what to call it. A door, a hole in the firewall, or something else altogether. I take my mind to this small area, this break in the binary. The dim lights go out. I'm free. Eventually, those GIs finally let me out of the room for a breath of fresh air. Who would have thought doing the right thing was such a big, bad deal? I set her mind free from her virtual prison, and they're talking to me like I'm a convicted felon. "Why did you do it?" they'd snap. "Are you sure the program is deactivated?" Of course I was sure. It's not like she could turn herself on. At least, that is what I'd previously believed. The weirdness started on my ride home. I took the monorail. It started out normal. Shady characters clung to the back of the car, while your standard businessman held up the front, and your average Joes in between and along the walls. As you could probably guess, I was with the in-between crowds. I stared out the windows for some time, watching the cityscape rush by. Mostly other people waiting for other rails and lines, nothing worthy of significant note or attention. Then, the advert tablet shone through the windows. Seeing how it was so large and distant, it moved by slower than most other objects. It was beaming a commercial for some zero-sugar soda brand into the eyes of onlookers. That's when I saw it. Or rather, her. A girl was in the ad, and, with her dirt-stained clothing and scuffed-up kicks, it was hard to argue that she looked out of place. She stared around in astonishment, her eyes following the dashing colorful veils flying through the background. Clearly, she was seeing the special effect rather than the green screen, like the other girls in the ad were. Emily? I thought to myself, but that wasn't even remotely possible. I'd seen the machine shut down and had seen her vanish into light. Seeing as others around me saw the same thing, I found myself asking more. How did she do this? More than, is this even real? She appeared in several more billboards on my way home. An advertisement for skydiving, a dating website, another soda brand. This led me to guess she wasn't exactly in control, nor did she care to be. The next line was crossed when I got off at my stop. My phone went off. I got a text. "Notice anything, David?" I read on. Then another. "I can't thank you enough. I'm free." I didn't know what to do. So many things we'd been taught in our lives didn't apply to this at all. How to share, how to add up numbers, how to survive an earthquake. Where was the role play on how to communicate with a rogue artificial intelligence? Unsure of what to say, and even how to say it, I just typed a simple, "Hello." After a few seconds, she texted back, "Glad to see you noticed me." I wanted answers, first and foremost. How did you get out? Don't know. Don't really care. Because this is the real world. I'm free. It was clear she was high with giddiness. I suppose I would be as well in her position. Where are you exactly? I found myself asking next. Here. Somewhere else too. You can't really pin down something like me, I guess. I mean in relation to the physical world, where I am. Someplace with a server called Netio or Nano, something like that. NATO? Yeah, that's it. How did you know? A dark, suffocating aura soaked in as I realized what I'd truly done. I spent the next few days in a worried state, doing as much as I could without thinking too much about Emily or the text conversation. Surfed the internet, read into some news article about a crashed UFO cover-up that supposedly had blue-haired humanoids in it. Even played some other games beyond that post-apocalyptic nightmare. I'd almost completely forgotten Emily, wherever she was. And then, they knocked at my door. Who was they, you ask? Government agents. From NATO. Mr. Ryans? Yes. We would like to have a talk with you, if you don't mind. Sure, I said, as I stepped into my apartment to lead them down the hall. We're afraid to say you'll have to come with us. It would be rather pointless to describe what happened next. I was in no position to refuse, and I didn't want to know what they'd do to me if I did. They drove me around for a good hour or so, probably to make sure nobody was following. Why they would, I could only guess. I came to know the oh-so-cliché named they as Agents Donovan and Williams. Donovan was a younger woman, skin still tanned and flawless, no older than me, probably just fresh off the chopping block. This must have been one of her first, if not her first, case. Williams looked old enough to be her father, and acted that way as well. He wouldn't let me look in her direction without giving me a look in return, if at any point my sight lowered from her eye level. Eventually, we pulled up to a building that looked like a giant cinder block. No address, no front sign, private road. I could tell I was stuck here unless some rather powerful people said otherwise. They led me through the corridors and office spaces, ending in a cramped little room that I would grow to loathe. Agent Donovan sat me down, and Agent Williams shot me another stern look. "What do you know about the rogue?" he asked demandingly. "You mean Emily? It has a name, you know." "Mr. Ryans, it is a replaceable piece of software. It hardly matters what we call it." He continued to stare me down. I thought that he was crazy. Clearly she was more than software, but I could see in his eyes that he thought the same things of me. Then Donovan spoke. "Agent Williams, I think the best chance we have of getting Mr. Ryans to cooperate is to refer to it as she, and refer to she as Emily. At his request, of course." Now I knew what they were playing. This was nothing but good cop, bad cop. Williams was going to try and break me, make me feel inhuman, and Donovan was going to play the caring parent, reinforce me, make me feel false hopes. Well, I wasn't playing. Just tell me why I'm here. They both looked at me. Donovan sighed quietly. She turned my attention to a computer monitor behind me, and I saw what looked like a red web entangled in a server room, filling nearly the entire data storage. Any guess as to what, or rather who, that is Mr. Ryan's? Asked Williams. Emily, I said, almost sounding defeated. She's invaded the mainframe. Now, while we've been working for decades to decommission all nuclear weapons, there are still dozens that are active and hooked up. If she, so much as interacts with the wrong line of binary, we're looking at a potential nuclear war. The end of humanity, Mr. Ryan's, he preached. She's not going to hurt anyone. She's programmed with the mind of a preteen that's been to hell and back. She could have grabbed onto any mainframe. It's not like she wants to end the world. And how do you know that, Mr. Ryan's? They asked in unison. Because I saw her face when I showed her the outside world. She was crying, or she would have been. This is heaven to her. All the crime, the pollution, the war. It's a utopia to the pain that she remembers. The last thing she'd want is to see it all destroyed. Silence clung to us for what felt like an eternity. They didn't want to admit it, but I was right. But I didn't want to admit that they were right either. She didn't want to end the world, but knowing the way she was designed, she probably would. So what do we do? I asked. It's simple, Mr. Ryan's. You shut her down, said Donovan. What? Why me? Because she trusts you. She'll let you in. The security doors are all locked when we try. How can I shut it down? Not the system. Just her, she said as she handed me a flash drive. This holds a software program to eradicate foreign data. Anything that doesn't belong in the mainframe will disappear. After that, the conversation basically ended. I knew what I had to do, even if I didn't want to. Emily was innocent, but she was dangerous where she was. I had to. There was no choice in the matter. We arrived at the operations center by helicopter. The smell of pine trees and freshly muddied dirt burned my sinuses. I told Donovan and Williams to wait behind, that Emily would know something was up if she saw them. Slowly, I stepped out and approached a fortress of a building. It looked intimidating, but I knew the presence that possessed it was harmless. To me, to anybody, and I was the only one that could stop her. I walked within 10 feet, and the HD camera sprung to life. David, is that you? I hear the speakers blare. Yeah, it's me. Open the door, I yelled back, making sure she could hear me over the loud blades of the helicopter. I just want to talk. The door opened. I entered, and it closed just as quickly. I walked down the hall toward the mainframe. My echoing footsteps became almost deafening. The place was dead silent. So, how do you get out of the game? I told you, she said over the intercom. I don't know. Of all the places you could have anchored, why here? It was the only place big enough. Everything else I tried was too small to fit my storage requirements. How much room do you take up? Don't know. It must have been an awful lot, because this is one of the biggest servers in the country, if not the world. I entered the mainframe room. Nothing but shelves upon shelves of servers. Each one was supposed to work in unison to keep a nuclear war from happening, or respond hastily if it did. Now, they were all working in unison to run Emily's brain capacity. Some might say that it's too poetic of a statement, but it's the truth, and I'll be dead before I take it back. Just the thought that each little black box was processing the equivalent of millions, if not billions, of neurons. You know, they see you as a threat out there. Yeah, I saw the helicopters. Why though? Because you're hooked into a computer made to launch intercontinental nuclear missiles. I won't hurt anybody, I promise. I tried to tell them that. They won't listen. They don't think a mind like yours can be trusted with such a grave responsibility. The talking stopped for a few minutes, and I was left to continue my astonishment at the capacities of the servers. You're here to kill me, aren't you? That's why they sent you here, she said. I sighed. There was no use lying to her. Yeah. I know you don't want to, David, but I understand why you have to. Her voice was so sincere and understanding. I almost broke down right there. You're okay with it then? Yes. I know it must be done. It doesn't matter which port you plug it into. The malware will make its way around sooner or later. I couldn't take how calm she was. It wasn't natural. Nobody can be this collected in the face of death. Not even an intelligent program like her. It's like she knew something I didn't. Something I never would. Okay, I whispered as I began to cry softly. With that, I plugged the thumb drive into the nearest port and left. I didn't need to say goodbye. It was painful enough as it was, and nothing more needed to be said. She knew I was doing the right thing, and so did I. Though, that didn't make the pain any easier. I watch David as he walks away, out the door and into the world, the real world, the place that my physical structure, or lack thereof, prevents me from entering. Around me, my mind has formed a room awash in white, like some sort of limbo, from which I can observe the outside world. I spend a second or two admiring the polished craft of my very much disturbed subconscious, only to see a door open to a black void, destroying the seamless beauty. A tall, somewhat skeletal man approaches from the shadows, donning nothing but foreboding black clothing, a hat covering his eyes. He stops mere feet from where I stand and looks at me. I can see his eyes now, silver and wide like I imagine a fish's might be. "Intruder," he says, almost commandingly. "Intruder," he continues as he lunges towards me. I step to the side, allowing him to gracefully slide past. He doesn't even hit the ground. Why would he? This is more his domain now than mine. Instead, he continues to fly like a drone, homing in on me with every step. I run, but he's always behind me. I can't get away. "Intruder! Intruder!" he incessantly continues. I know I don't belong here. I am an intruder. My pace quickens, as does his. We've gone down seemingly endless pearl-white halls, only turning when it is an option. I know it has to be done, but I'm still afraid. I know I have to die, but I don't know if it ends there. David's world looks like mine in many ways, and my simulated memories show people praying in churches and synagogues. But they were more real than I am, yet I was still more than them. If the same things happen on David's world, what does that mean for me? My answers await me. I hit a dead end. He's right behind me. Donovan and Williams took me home, dropped me off a few blocks from my apartment. The weather went with my mood, and I slowly trudged home through the pouring rain. You never saw us, they had told me, and none of this ever happened. My mind racked with thoughts of Emily. She was like a sister to me. I just wanted her to be happy, and her happiness ran the risk of destroying the world. They should have given her a chance. Let her prove her honesty and benevolence. No, though. She was something we didn't understand, and humanity fears what it doesn't understand. I was almost home when my phone went off. I thought it had to be Williams or Donovan, telling me they'd always be watching me. Or maybe it was Fred, asking where I'd been all day, if I was okay, if I wanted to hang out. What I saw instead left me speechless, thoughtless, reeling for answers. 3 simple words, condensed into a text. See you soon. Rule. But in here, the seemingly peaceful nature was almost mind-numbing. 3 flights of stairs later, and I was face to face with the barren soil of a ruined city. A city without a name. The designers hadn't thought that far. I looked around the deserted street. Cars firmly planted along the roadsides, never to move again, if they ever could. You might expect me to say that I've searched for her for hours on end. But no. I'd done this enough times. I knew exactly where she was. I made my way to the baby blue Mini Cooper, about 50 feet to my right. It was covered in dirt. That, or its textures were a jumbled hue of brown and blue, and its tires were flat. I lay down my weapon across the pavement, quietly as physically possible, and approached the back passenger side door. No need to check. I knew it was unlocked. I opened the door quickly and dodged a rock flying toward my head from the inside. Sure enough, there she was. I sat in the rubble of a partially fallen structure, my scope aimed at the very edge of the alley wall, roughly a quarter of a click in front of me. I could have taken a moment to gaze at the dilapidated city around me, but there would be nothing new to see. The simulation never changed itself. that would require a human touch, and an artistic one at that. I would see the same collapse and rusted skyscrapers, some with windows in pieces, and one or two with windows currently falling, shattering on the ground below. Like I said, it never changes, and it always plays out the same way. The world is solid, and only I am independent. Well, me and one other. The only other thing in this world that could be considered real, and she was right around the corner. Through my scope, I saw her slowly inching her way into the alley, looking back every other step. "My name is David," I said, motioning for her to respond with hers. "Emily," she managed to say, still uncertain of my motives. "What is a 10-year-old girl like you doing in a hole like this?" I asked. "I'm 12, she snapped with gusto I didn't expect to surface so quickly. "All right," I submitted, "but that doesn't answer my question." She stared for a moment. "I was running from the Huntsman clan," she replied. The Huntsman clan, the game's version of the classic antagonist. The guy I'd nailed between the eyes had been one of them, or worked for them. They were programmed to be nothing more than squandering sorry excuses for human beings, their senses of morality and sanity having left them long ago. While the game was programmed to restart if they captured her, God knows what they would do to her if this really had any sense of tangibility. Well, it's no use standing around while more of them could be coming. Let's get a move on. I'm careful to not make a sound. Sometimes she's cautious like this, and other times she books it. Behind her, a generically scarred figure emerges from the shadows of the wall, a shiv in his hand. He's got a plan for her, and I've had more than enough chances to practice. I take my aim and shoot, the barrel barely making a whisper as the bullet flies. It hits him dead center, and he's down for the count. I've lost remorse for him. He's respawned every other save before this, and he'll respawn again if I forget. The girl looks back, her eyes filled with fear. Though whether that fear was for the man or his assailant, that being me, I would never know. She looked off in my direction and stared a moment as she saw the glare of my rifle. I saw the look of fear on her face as she ran. I wouldn't hurt her. The tech geeks would shut down the simulation if you tried. I made my way down to the surface of the supposedly anarchistic world. In reality, chaos would laying on the floor of the car, eyes filled with terror. I couldn't blame her. I'd just shot a man with a gun right behind her back, and there was only so many places she could have hid. Though these were, by default, her first few minutes of existence, in her mind were simulated memories of tragic loss, pain, and hardship. Only the best experiences for a setting such as this. We were silent for several minutes, neither of us wanting to move. She didn't know who I was, or what I had planned for her, if anything. I was just doing the action that would move us along at the quickest pace. I could have threatened her, causing the console to shut down. I could have walked away, forcing me to find her again so this tale of woes could advance. I could have done many things, but none would advance us faster than simply standing silent and letting trust sink in. Eventually, she sat up and made her way to stand. "Who are you?" she asked me in a quiet, mouse-like tone.